Evening, everyone. Eric O'Brien here to talk about The Drums of Doom, Part 2 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga. This is the first edition published by Outskirts Press. It's difficult to see. There's an image that I drew on the back, but it's more visible in the second edition. This book is no longer in print, but you can probably still find it on Amazon and elsewhere. The new edition, which I republished with Stratton Press, looks like this. Some of the major characters. There's Carmen, rendition of Carmen, an excellent version of her, and visions of Under-Earth, some scary stuff. And the back is kind of standard stuff. Okay, we'll read a little bit. Shouldn't spoil Curse Rage too much. Okay. The Duaredheim Staff Saga includes Curse Rage, Part 1, The Drums of Doom, Part 2, The Last Admiral, Part 3, which is a prequel to Curse Rage, and Part 4, The Ice Moon, which is very, very nearly finished. It's in the final editing stages. Okay. For Carolyn, the book is dedicated to a true love of mine, Carolyn. I extend my sincerest thanks to the editor, Angela James of Stratton Press, and my family of editors, Kevin and Lucia, my parents, and Tommy Magazoo, who was immortalized in this work as the Wizard Zoo. Within these pages, Sir John Anderson of Munson, Knight of Renown, lives forever. John Anderson was my great uncle of Munson, Massachusetts. He fought in World War II. Okay. Preface. This is the second book of the Duaredheim Staff series, and the continuation of Book 1 entitled Curse Rage. The Secret Way, or The Catacombs of the Lich King, may have been more fitting titles, but I chose instead to name it The Drums of Doom. Curse Rage was the product of over 10 years of labor, and its sequel has been an ongoing project since 2004. Curse Rage introduced many characters, Tempest, and a broad spectrum of deities worshipped by its inhabitants. The Drums of Doom continues the adventure, and I waste little time in reintroducing established characters. However, at the request of my dedicated audience, I am including a broad cast of characters as an index to this book. I will try as best that I can to provide the tools necessary to discover the proper pronunciation of the most difficult names, including brief descriptions and the significance of the characters. Reintroductions notwithstanding, character traits, appearance, and personality should all shine through, as I dutifully put them all through the meat grinder. I designed the Drums of Doom in such a way that it mirrors our own troubled times. The earth itself, at least as far as we humans are concerned, is in dire peril. We see these dangers every day on television, in newspapers, in the health of our children, and in the drastic changes to our climate. Religion, the spirit's salvation, created to bring humanity closer to the divine, may instead bring about our ruin. Technology may redeem us, and yet it too is a double-edged sword. In this electronic age, we can communicate across the globe in an instant, and yet we may all be lonelier than ever. All these same troubles exist on Tempest, to one degree or another, and as such, I believe that they add a much greater scope to my tale. Realism and fantasy combine to make the story believable. The motivations of the characters lend grievous consequences to their failures, and I pray that the story will keep you glued to your seat from cover to cover. The first chapter contains a declaration of freedom and a constitution for the new republic that could be misconstrued as rebellious in nature. In fact, it is a bold tribute and a powerful reminder of the personal sacrifice and incredible courage exhibited by the founding fathers of the United States of America. The Declaration of Independence was itself an act of ultimate rebellion, carried out by the bravest of men, who could find no other solution to the problems of their day. If not for their insight and their vision, this would not now be the land of the free and the home of the brave. Many delegates and signatories signed the Declaration of Independence in remembrance. I would like to name some of the founding fathers: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Hancock, and Benjamin Franklin. These men, whose hands we will never grasp, into whose living eyes we will never stare, and yet their words stand immortal. The Drums of Doom is foremost an epic fantasy adventure, designed to create a provocative, entertaining, and exciting images in the minds of its readers. Parallels between our world and the world of Tempest exist solely to add depth to the story and its characters, and not to suggest solutions to the troubles of our times. I do, however, reserve the right as a free citizen to poke a little fun at it and perhaps to suggest, oh so humbly, that our only chance for survival is to believe that we are all one. One what, you might ask? One everything, I would answer. My special thanks to all my noble friends who have contributed characters and ideas that helped to make this work complete. Tommy Magazoo, Richard Wolfe, Robert Jackman, Edward Brangan, William O'Loughlin, Joseph Garside, and Peter Bell, to name a few. In Book 1, the characters thwarted their nemesis. Prevailing against all odds, they won for themselves the gem of the staff, a critical component of the Duaredheim staff. Following the enchanted pull of the locating scepter, they now descend into the uncharted depths of Under-Earth. Climbing into a world of eternal darkness, their courage is sorely tested. And then we have a drawing I did of the world. Tempest is the name of the world, the planet, if you will, and its continents. Okay. And then where most of the story takes place is in the region north of Safe Haven, which is most of part 1, and in the northern reaches of Fermanagh, above Safe Haven. Okay, and then as I said before, in the back of the book, we have an extensive character index, bibliography, and some other stuff, so everything can be researched. Okay. Prologue. Shortly after Leander set sail for the lands of Fermanagh in the year 2020, the Druids of Arundel completed their greatest temple. The ice moon was at its peak. The winter solstice had come. They hurled the last pail of excavated earth, save for that very occasion, to the four winds. The following chapter is the tale of how they built it. The Henge of Stone. This is my theory on how Stonehenge was erected in epic fantasy form. The Henge of Stone. High kings ruled the lands of Arundel, and the Druids worshipped it. Revered from Egerson to Sundsvall, they erected their holiest temple on a high plain by the sea. It was sacred ground, where their ancestors first landed on sailing ships from a forgotten country. The highest-ranking priest of their order was the Archdruid. He was old, but not overly so, and his hair was white. Tall and square-shouldered, he carried himself with the vitality of a much younger man. His hands were calloused and strong from farming, and his eyes were gray like the sea beneath a storm. Respected and sought after for his wisdom, his visions had helped his people prosper. The designs for his ultimate tribute to the heavens had come to him in a dream. They would build a monumental henge of stone. In his youthful travels, he had found the perfect source of sandstone, which they called Sarsenstone, along their northernmost shores. The form and grain of the stone was perfect, and the location of the quarry, so near to the sea, provided him with the means to move it. His followers had grown restless and complacent. He needed a goal to unify them. During the harvest festival, he related his vision. Some claimed that his dream was an impossible task. Others relished the challenge and flocked to his call. When their morale faltered, he would point out how far they had already come and bolster their hope anew. 20 years of toil, and this is how they accomplished the impossible. First, the Archdruid had to find the perfect site, and so he chose the place of their ancestors' landing on high ground near the sea. The remnants of their ancient temple still stood there. His own father's father had told him that it was once a ring fort built by the tribe of the Gale, the ancestors of all the Druids. The Pilgrim Gale had excavated 2 great berms of earth in a wide circle spanning a central moat. Within the innermost ring, a sphere of timbers had once stood. In those ancient times, all manner of barbarians and fearsome creatures roamed the land, and they needed it in order to defend themselves. They called their ring fort Aerolot. The site of Aerolot was no accident. The countryside was a mostly flat, expansive plain. Approaching enemies were visible across great distances. The Druids also knew that a powerful nexus of energy existed there. It was the perfect site to nurture and protect the Pilgrim Gale. He had seen the place in his dream and the foundation of his vision. The Henge would preserve their history for all time, and in order to accomplish it, his people would have to accomplish 4 impossible tasks. The first was to build a mound of earth over 150 feet and some 15 feet in height, with a great gently sloping ramp rising to its top. There were many reasons for this. The soil provided support for each standing stone, allowing them to be erected in a perfect circle, leveled, mortised, and finally capped with curved lintel stones joined by tongue and groove. It would seem a tremendous feat, but it was done yard by yard, one bag of earth at a time, by people with one unified goal. The reason I believe this is possible is that the average standing stone of Stonehenge weighed about 25 tons, or 50,000 pounds. The average team of oxen is capable of pulling 12,000 pounds for short bursts. So, if I could imagine 12 or more oxen working in tandem, rolling the stones on logs or whatnot, they should easily be able to pull a standing stone. Okay. The second impossible feat was up to the Archdruid himself to accomplish. Over the course of an entire year, he charted the passing of the sun, the moons, and the stars in the heavens, and carefully marked the orientations of each upon the hilltop. Working his way around the perimeter of the mound, he marked where each pillar of his monument would stand in relation to the stars. Each standing stone of his monument would mark the annual progression of the heavens and allow the prediction of lunar eclipses. The third task involved even greater toil. His masons labored in the north, notching the sarsen stone of the quarry walls in a precise fashion, and when winter came, ice froze in the cracks that they had made, and nature accomplished much of what they needed done. Using this raw material, they cut and shaped gigantic pillars of some 20 feet in length and 6 feet in width, most weighing over 25 tons, laid them on logs and rode them with the help of oxen to a nearby tributary. There they fashioned rafts of sufficient size to carry their prize, and punted them downriver to the sea. In the same manner, they towed their pillars north and rolled them up the sacred hill. When each stone arrived, his excavators dug enormous pits, well plumbed and of the exact depth and width necessary to accommodate the standing stones in their footings. They then lowered the sarsen stones into the pits one after another, plumbed and backfilled until each pillar stood tall and level within its hole. Erecting them in a perfect circle of some 108 feet in diameter required the placement of 74 stones arranged side by side and 3 feet apart, so that they each would carry half of the load of the capstones that would span them. When every pillar was in place, their topmost surfaces were chiseled smooth to the perfect heights and mortised so that their lintels would seat firmly atop them. Connected by tongue and groove joints, they meticulously carved them to form a perfect circle. The mound of earth provided the perfect surface to carve each one and set them in place one after another. When every feature of their labors had been completed, inspected, and judged to be in perfect congruence with the stars, tempests, and the elements, they excavated the sacred hill, and that was the fourth insurmountable task. When their toils were complete, only the henge of stones remained, standing tall for the centuries to witness them. It was a miracle, crafted with the highest respect for their world and the greatest of personal sacrifices. When the Archdruid's dream finally stood tall for all to see, there were few non-believers left among them. The henge became a center for worship, holier even than their greatest temples of the past, and their village prospered. Kings and queens from the surrounding lands donated handsomely for burial sites near the sacred monument. Their sons and daughters would often be married there. They routinely held holy ceremonies celebrating the solstices and all the great celestial events. The stone monument became a symbol of perseverance and pride. It would carry their culture through the centuries. Generations of worshippers, visitors, and observers would walk among the stones in silent awe because the henge demanded reverence. It was a lasting testament to the accomplishment and respect that can come from one man's dream, and that is the miracle of Erelot. Antinius Molinar, chronicler of history. Okay, we'll read a small bit of Vlad's declaration. Captain's log, 7th day of Sanguis, 2032. We set sail from the shores of Dragonia with high hopes. The ocean has been for the most part calm, but now we have entered the treacherous waters of the North Sea, and great mountains of ice float all around us. Time, so often a rare thing, is now a bounty, and we, the newest members of the Drakar Noir, waste none of it. Together, with the help of my comrades, we have begun the framework for a new world order. The Declaration of Freedom. When the gods and government of a nation so profoundly fail the people, it is the supreme duty and moral responsibility of the afflicted to correct it. Should a nation's government abandon its citizens and due course of law be found to be impotent in the face of the established order, then revolution is the only solution. Insurrection, being by definition the most severe reaction to desperation, cannot be undertaken lightly. The Declaration of Freedom cites the following abuses and injustices perpetrated on the people of Dragonia by their queen, goddess, and government. The 500-year war against the nations of Firmenor has continued to rage despite parliamentary decree, military advisement, lack of enemy aggression, or formal declarations of war. For wrongfully perpetuating the illusion of an enemy empire and fabricating evidence designed to continue the war ad infinitum. That kind of sounds a little bit like the Persian Gulf, doesn't it? The armed forces, ever the pawn of their government, have suffered countless abuses. These include the use of the army to quell insurrection. Kind of rings true now, doesn't it? Apprehend suspected outlaws, extortion of taxes by might of arms, and the genocide of several barbarous tribes. The Queen has systematically reduced the navy, created for conquest and defense of the shores, to a role of piracy, smuggling, and perpetuation of the slave trade. Dragonian citizens have no right to free trials and can be accused, convicted, and sentenced within minutes, the most common verdict being death. Remember, this is fantasy. Dragonian citizens naturalized through immigration or surrender must abandon their faiths and convert. Resisting infidels are publicly humiliated and tortured, those admitting blasphemy executed. The Queen routinely ignores laws passed by parliamentary decree. Parliament itself no longer exists to debate on matters of national importance, but rather is an illusion of legal equality designed to quell rebellion and subjugate the people. Seems a little familiar. For the Queen's enactment of foreign policies, preventing free trade with other nations and thus perpetuating the decline of national economies. For the indentured servitude of the peasant classes, the legalized slavery of prisoners of war, and the general acceptance of a society ruled by terror and domination. For the immoral invasion of private homes for the purpose of quartering soldiers, collecting taxes, search of evidence, or other more nefarious ends. Linked to this is the complete unaccountability for atrocities committed by such soldiers against the people. What are clear are the totalitarian rule of the Queen, rulership through fear, and the complete lack of individual freedoms. For these reasons and others so vile they were banned entry into this document, we hereby formally declare our intention to secure the freedom of Dragonia's people. Therefore, as not to revolt without a clear intention of goals and purpose, we have penned the following Constitution of the Republic. And then, partly as a tribute to our Constitution, I used it for a model to create Vlad's Constitution. So this is where we'll begin on the second segment, as if I have too long of recording, it takes about 3 days to upload to YouTube. So I'm going to pause here, and Section 2 will begin on page 20 with the Constitution of the Republic of Dragonia. Thank you, and remember, read Curse Rage, The Drums of Doom, and the other parts of the Duaredheim Staff Saga. Thank you, and have a good night.